All right. Well, my name is Amy King, and I am the curator at the Tulare County Museum in Visalia, California. And I'm so excited to be here with Susan Anderson, who is the History Curator and Program Manager of the California African American Museum in Los Angeles. And I would just like to start by having you tell us a little bit about your background and your role at the museum there.
Well, thanks, Amy. I'm glad to do that. I've actually spent a lot of time in Visalia and in that area because I've done a lot of research on Allensworth, and in 2008, which was the centennial of the founding of the all-Black town of Allensworth, I was the curator for the state of California of an exhibit that traveled around the state, looking at Allensworth history. So that where you are became one of my favorite areas. I even got a plaque from the Board of Supervisors way back then in Tulare County. So from that, I mean, it's indicative of what I've been doing for a long time. My work has been to document the African American presence in California history, and it is a significant presence. It's been very influential in civic culture and arts and culture in all kinds of ways since the time that California came into the United States as a state in the 19th century, since the gold rush. So I've been doing that kind of documentation for a long time. And my job now at the California African American Museum, which is a museum, it's a department in the state of California. So the work we do is for the people of California, is to do the same thing as a public historian, to provide content, to do programming, to build partnerships, do exhibitions, and a whole range of things to do historic preservation in places that are important to African American history. So a whole range of things as a curator. And you know what it's like to be a curator. You do a little bit of everything.
That's definitely right. Well, what a wonderful connection. I didn't know that you had done so much work in the area here. So that's exciting to learn. Thank you for sharing that. When I was reading through the notes for the exhibit, I was excited to find that the exhibit is titled after a poem. And I was hoping that you could talk about the connection between, or not a poem, but an essay. If you could talk about the connection of that essay, We Are Not Strangers Here, with the exhibit.
Certainly. Well, the whole idea really grew from knowing that people often see Black people in California as an urban group, and the majority of all people live in cities. But at the same time, Black people in California have a really important past related to rural areas around the state. And it really covers the whole state. And the exhibition that we put together gives you a sense of some of those stories. I mean, starting way up in the far north of California in Siskiyou County, all the way down to near the Mexican border in Imperial County, and certainly in the Central Valley, and right in Tulare County and neighboring counties. We have stories to tell about the history of African Americans. It goes all the way back to the 19th century. So we wanted to let people know that that Black people are not strangers to country life, to rural life, to agricultural endeavors, ranching, farming, that kind of thing in California history.
That is so perfect, because that's something that we try to do here at this museum too, is showing the connection between different cultural groups and their contributions to agriculture, specifically in our area. But we also try to present those histories through stories. And I love that this highlights the connection of African Americans with agriculture through stories. And I was just wondering what you thought was the importance of sharing these stories even now.
Well, I'm going to move a slide here. At least I think I'm going to move a slide here. Just to give people a sense and a little background while you and I talk. First of all, I think learning about our history, getting that fuller picture and that more inclusive picture, that's important anytime. It's especially important now. I think people have become more sensitive and more questioning about in being inclusive when it comes to what we know about our history, what we should be pointing to as significant, what deserves to be preserved, what deserves to be taught, and that kind of thing. That's a discussion that's going on in our society right now. So I think that this exhibit, We Are Not Strangers Here, African American Histories in Rural California, is right on time. And even though we're talking about the past, we're bringing it to light in a time when people are really having these discussions. And the picture that people can see on the screen right now is one of the banners, one of the big, beautiful, colorful banners that's in the exhibit at your museum that they can come see in person. And it's got historical photographs, it's got texts and documents that show and help tell the story of African American farmers and ranchers who have been in the state since the 19th century and how they contributed to rural communities through their work, through their vigilance about civil rights, and through the way that they helped build rural communities.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's just so important to highlight the rural parts of California, because I think that's not something people really think about when you say California. They'll think of the big cities, San Francisco or LA. And so it's really great to be highlighting these rural parts of California. And what role do you see those playing in shaping our diverse history of California even today?
Well, that's one of the things that the exhibit really brings out. I mean, as Californians, we know, maybe people around the country don't necessarily know, but we know that agriculture and rurality are at the heart of our state. And we're the most important agricultural economy in the United States. And so one of the things that this exhibit does is it tells stories about how African Americans interacted with other settlers, how they, what their relationship was to the land, and that sort of thing. Families, it looks at families like the Monroe family up in El Dorado County that came to California during the gold rush and owned hundreds of acres of orchards. And, they were able to sell produce and other things to their neighbors and become well established in that area. We look around the state at families and individuals like that. And for instance, in the slide that we're looking at now, We spend time in the show certainly talking about landowners, people who owned and operated farms and ranches who were important, but we also talk about people who worked the fields. The majority of people of all races in California who are engaged in agriculture are field workers. Then that's true whether you're Latinx, whether you're African American, whether you're Asian American, whether you're white. And so we tell the story, some of the stories about migrants, Black migrants who came to California, who weren't on their way to the city, they were on their way to the Central Valley. And we talk about, things like people are aware from classic literature, like The Grapes of Wrath. People were aware of the Joad family. They're aware of that population that used to be called Okies that were driven to California as Dust Bowl refugees. But they don't realize that there were tens of thousands of Black Okies who came to California starting during the Dust Bowl crisis and all the way through the 1960s. So these are some examples of what we want people to get a chance to see.
Sure, sure. Another really important part of the exhibit, I think, was the part on Allensworth, and that is in our county here. And I was just wondering what you thought the impact was from Allensworth on African Americans in California as a whole.
Well, let's see. I don't think I have a picture from Allensworth, but let me go through these slides if you don't mind.
Sure.
Here we do. We do have a picture from Allensworth. If people are looking on their right, that's a cropped photograph of a group of 3 of the first teachers in the Allensworth Elementary School. Allensworth, in case people don't know, was an all-Black town that was established about about 30 minutes out of Visalia?
Yeah, I would say 30 to 45 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you're coming from the south, it's about 40 minutes north of Bakersfield. Mm-hmm. It's been preserved as a state historic park. So it's wonderful because you can still visit the place and really get an incredible hands-on sense of the history through the buildings that have been preserved. And the town was really part of a movement across the United States, especially after Reconstruction. African Americans established their own towns in the West primarily, fleeing from the kind of racist persecution that they faced in the South, wanting to be safe in their own numbers, wanting to exercise their rights as citizens, which they often were not able to do, wanting to establish their own businesses and have a level of autonomy that society was prohibiting them from having. So Allensworth was actually part of this movement, and it was a very successful town. It had its own voting district, its own school district. It established the first branch of the Tulare County Library system in 1910. And all of those buildings are still there for you to take a look at. And it definitely in California was a source of pride for Black Californians, but it also got a lot of attention from the larger society. There were regular articles in newspapers like the Los Angeles Times, for instance, because Colonel Allensworth, after whom the town was named, and his family, he retired from the United States Army as a chaplain and moved with his family to Los Angeles and was considered a foremost citizen. So he got a lot of attention in the LA Times, and so did Allensworth. And it was the subject of legislation that actually wasn't passed in Sacramento. And so it actually, when you look at the history of Allensworth, the fact that it's still preserved as a state historic park, the memory and both the town, the operation of the town itself, and the memory of the town have had a palpable impact on people and generations of people in the state.
Yeah, gosh, it's all just so interesting, and there's so much information in the exhibit. One other thing that I wanted to ask that kind of relates to this was the Edmund Weisinger case from 1890, going all the way to the Supreme Court, creating a court mandate that California public schools could not exclude African American students, and just seemingly a huge first for California. And I was just hoping you could speak more to that and maybe the role that Tulare County had in that court case.
Absolutely. Yeah, Edmund Weisinger came to California during the gold rush. He was an enslaved person when he arrived, and he, like many other people, earned money in the gold mines and doing other kinds of labor, and bought his manumission papers from the person that said that he owned him, and went on to establish a family that actually has been in Tulare County and in that area for generations, that farmed for generations. Edmund Weisinger in the late 19th century went to enroll his son in the local elementary school in Visalia, and a teacher, Mr. Cruikshank, told Mr. Weisinger to take his son to what was called the colored school, that he would not be allowed to go to the Visalia public school. And Edmund Weisinger sued at various levels. And as you said, the case went to the state Supreme Court in California. And for the first time, a law was established that directed the state schools to be open to Black students. A lot of people don't realize that from its inception and from the first legislative session of California as a state, there were laws that protected white supremacy, that limited and restricted the rights of people of color, especially of indigenous people, of African Americans, and then later on, Chinese Americans in the state, especially. And the laws throughout the 19th century, they did keep changing, but in the beginning of statehood, California actually prohibited Black people from attending public schools at all. And then later those laws were changed because of the agitation and the pressure and the organizing in the 19th century. Later, the law was changed to set up separate schools. So the term colored school came into existence. And we had a situation where Black parents were paying taxes like everybody else to support the public school system. Their children were not allowed to go to those schools, and they were paying their own money to set up colored schools and getting some state subsidy for those schools. So the Weisinger decision, which was passed by the state Supreme Court in 1890, changed that and said that the law was changed and that Weisinger's son and any Black student needed to be allowed to attend public schools in California.
Right. Oh my goodness. There's just so much history that I think is really, like you're saying, unknown, that I'm so happy to be able to bring to light with this exhibit at our museum. Was there anything else that you wanted to highlight from the exhibit?
Well, let's see if I have one more slide. Yeah, this is just our final. This is actually the final panel. I want to let people know that there are many more banners than what we're showing today. And this final one, though, brings it up to the present day, because we wanted to let people know that there the Black stewardship of the land and agricultural practices are still continuing, that there are Black farmers and Black ranchers throughout the state, throughout the Central Valley. We name some of them and talk about some of their enterprises, but we also talk about the food justice movement that is around in cities. And we talk about some of the organizations like Urban Tilth in Richmond, and Oakland's Actinone Verba, these urban farms that are being set up all around the state to help people, even in the cities, connect with land, to grow food, to combat hunger, and to build community. So the exhibit actually ends with information that brings people up to date. And also there's a feature at the end of the exhibit where we ask people to please respond and to add their stories and to give us their thoughts about all of this.
Oh, that's so great. What a wonderful way to include the visitors too. So yes, I am so happy that we got a chance to do this today. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope everyone can come visit while we have this through the end of December. We hope to see you here at the museum.
I want to encourage people to come out, and thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.